Thank you, Mary Beth. Thank you so much for getting us together. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever your time frame is today. Thank you so much for being here. I had a plan for today. I had a plan. I wanted to talk with you about a book called Reverse Meditation by Andrew Holacek. This is the book. And we're going to be using some of the content of this book at our December retreat. And I actually went so far as even to prepare a PowerPoint just to prove to you I really did this. I had a PowerPoint for I thought maybe we'd use it today. But last night, I woke up in the middle of the night with Israel and Gaza on my mind. And I don't usually wake up in the middle of the night thinking about the news. I wake up in the middle of the night for other reasons, but not necessarily thinking about the news. But I did last night, and I found myself asking myself, what is it that needs to be said? What needs to be addressed in the context of the magnitude of what is happening in the Middle East? I happened to call my dear friend, Rabbi Rami Shapiro, this morning. Rami and I, some of you know, have led any number of retreats together at St. Mary's. And we actually led a retreat, a pilgrimage to Israel a couple of years ago before the pandemic. So I had the great privilege of being with Rami, who has lived and studied in Israel any number of times. So I called Rami this morning and I said, Brother Rami, I'm just calling to see how you're doing. And he said, my amygdala is firing all the time. You know, that's the sort of the burglar alarm system in the brain. He says, I'm just all over the place emotionally. He said, I have such affection for the Palestinians and what has happened to them since the 1967 war and since the founding of the State of Israel. And he said, I am so heartbroken about what is happening in my country, in Israel. And so he said, I'm awash in complicated feelings. So I found myself thinking that I wanted to talk a little bit with you, meditate a little bit with you, and then we'll have some exchange through the chat function in Zoom. I want to talk with you. I found myself thinking of Jesus's farewell discourse. This is in the fourth gospel, the Gospel of John, in which Jesus simply says to his friends, he's saying goodbye to them, and he says, you will have sorrow now. You will have sorrow now. I think he could have said, you will have horror now. Because certainly what they were getting ready to experience was full of both sorrow and horror. When a child dies, life is very hard. And when children and people die by violence, life is unspeakably hard. My work for the last 50 years has been as an Episcopal priest, as a psychotherapist, and as a teacher of contemplative practices, Christian and Buddhist. And for 26 years, I have taught Buddhist meditation, mindfulness in Christian churches. My core passion has been interspiritual conversation, particularly between followers of the Jesus way and practitioners of the Buddha's path. In my psychotherapy office here in this office, because human suffering is what shows up here in its numberless forms. I have been building a bridge between these two traditions. In 2008, I published my first book, which is entitled Blessed Relief, What Christians Can Learn from Buddhists About Suffering. And then 11 years later, I wrote the book to which Mary Beth referred, The Body Knows the Way, Coming Home Through the Dark Night. There's a story in Buddhist tradition, some of you may know it. It's the story of Kasima Gautami. Jesus taught for at most, maybe 3 years. The Buddha taught for 45 or 46 years. And so there's just so much more textual material that's available to us from the Buddha's teachings than from Jesus's teachings. And the story of Kasima Gautami goes like this. Her name has come down to us through all the years, 2,600 years ago. So Kasima Gautami is a young woman whose child has died. My imagining is that this child has died through illness, but I'm not sure that the story actually shares how the child has died. And she is she's out of her mind with grief, and she is carrying around her little child, the dead body of her child, for 4 days. And her family says, you need to go talk to the Buddha. You need to go talk to the Buddha. And the Buddha in his tradition is known as the great physician, just as Jesus is known as the great physician in Christian tradition. And so she goes to see the Buddha, and she begs the Buddha to use his miraculous powers to bring her child back to life. Sound familiar? Lazarus's story. And the story of the little girl who dies, that Jesus says, he says she's just sleeping. So the Buddha says to Kasima Gautami, he says, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go to every house, and I want you to ask them to give you a handful of mustard seed. But this mustard seed must come from a home which has never seen death. And so that's her assignment. And so she begins in her village to go from house to house to get a handful of mustard seeds from some house which has never seen death. And she can't find that house. At every house, they have a story of death. And so she comes back to the Buddha, and she tells him that she has failed in her task. She wasn't able to find a house which had never known death. And after hearing all these stories of loss and grief and sorrow and horror and rage and despair, she's ready to give up her own child for burial. And then she, as you might imagine, she becomes the Buddhist follower at that point. Herbert Anderson is a pastoral theologian, and he says that when life is hard, it's not so much what we can say that helps, but it's what we can bear to hear. When life is hard, it's not so much what we can say, but what we can bear to hear. When I call my my buddy Rami Shapiro this morning. He said, Gordon, you're the only person who's called me out of all my spiritual friends. I was really surprised at that. And then I think one story, excuse me, I have a little tickle in my throat. Sometimes we ask ourselves when we're going into the room of grief, we ask ourselves, what can I say? What can I say? And I knew that for me, it was really, what can I bear to hear Rami have to say about about what's going on in this part of the world that he knows so intimately. Why questions naturally arise. They haunt, they can obsess us, and the conceptual mind goes into overdrive to try to make sense of, to explain to ourselves and to one another why things happen. We believe that if only we could understand, we might somehow feel better. I wish it were that simple. There's a professor of philosophical theology at Yale Divinity School called Nicholas Wolterstorff. And Nicholas Wolterstorff lost his son, his young adult son, in a climbing accident. And he wrote a marvelous little book, you may know it, called Lament for a Son. And here's sort of the purple passage from that book to my eye. He said, please don't say it's really not so bad, because it is. Death is awful, demonic. If you think your task as a comforter is to tell me that really, all things considered, it's not so bad, you do not sit with me in my grief, but place yourself off in the distance away from me. Over here, over there, you are no help. What I need to hear from you is that you recognize how painful it is. I need to hear from you that you are with me in my desperation. To comfort me, you have to come close. Come sit beside me on my mourning bench. Come sit beside me on my mourning bench. I happened to be watching Anderson Cooper on CNN last night, and he was talking with a woman who had some family members who had been abducted by Hamas. And I noticed, and some of you may have heard these remarkable conversations between Stephen Colbert and Anderson Cooper, both of whom lost fathers at a young age. They're remarkable conversations. And I noticed that Anderson Cooper moved out of the journalistic posture, and he simply, as this woman was talking, he simply put his hand on her shoulder. He wasn't saying anything. He wasn't interviewing her. He was sitting beside her on her mourning bench. I thought, there's somebody who knows this territory. I don't know about you, but when I receive bad news, it takes a while to penetrate. I think I'm just kind of wired up that way. I remember when the Covenant School shooting happened here in Nashville, and that was only, I was counting it up, it was only 6 or 7 months ago. When that school shooting happened here in Nashville, I had one client who said, he said, I just can't come in to talk about myself today. Um, I don't want to come do psychotherapy today. I don't want to talk about myself. So I had that hour free, and I found that I wanted to just walk. My body needed to move. And because it was the Easter season, what came to mind was the marvelous Johann Sebastian Bach Easter oratorio, Christ lag in Todesbanden. It's German for Christ lay in the bonds of death. And I put that music on as I was walking. It's not the text so much that moves me, it's the actual music itself. And I found myself just full of rage that this kind of thing can happen. That was what was up for me. Just full of rage that this kind of thing could happen. I didn't know at that time many of the particulars about it. It was early on in learning about it. Later that evening, I got a text from a therapist friend. He said, "My wife is in the center of this horror." He said, "She knows the mother of the shooter, and she knows the best friend of the mother of one of the victims. She is just crying and crying and crying as she feels for both. Words fail. This world, this terror, this love." Just gut-wrenching. So I have a couple of things I want to share with you of a practical nature. It said that pastoral theology is practical theology, so I'm a practical theologian. One of the things that we talk about in mindfulness practice is rocking in the cradle of the breath. I like that phrase a lot. Rocking in the cradle of the breath. And there's a therapist named Peter Levine. He has a book called Waking the Tiger. And it's about trauma work. So what I want to invite you to do is to place your right hand underneath your left armpit, and then to take your left hand and just hold yourself around your elbow, whatever way that's comfortable for you. Just do this in a way where you're not just completely scrunched up. And just let your eyes close here for a moment. And just feel yourself supported by the chair or wherever you're sitting, bed, couch, whatever. Just feel yourself supported by the surface on which you're sitting. And I'm going to invite you to sink as best you can, to sink and soften into the support of your seat. See what would like to relax. See where there's any bracing, any gripping, any holding, any contraction. In the face of pain, what our bodies naturally do is they contract. So just noticing where there's any contraction for you, whether about the news of the day or other things that are going on in your life. Just letting yourself experience this contraction and then being aware of your breathing. The full length of the in-breath, the full length of the out-breath, and the space at the bottom of the out-breath. So this is just one breath at a time, just rocking in the cradle of the breath. Just this next in-breath. Just this next out-breath. See if you can bring the movement of breathing front and center into your awareness. And let yourself rock in the cradle of the breath. We'll do this in silence for just a minute. We're not trying to fix anything. We're not trying to make anything go away. We're just showing up for our experience. And let it, the breathing, the spirit, if you will, rock us in its cradle. When you're ready, let your eyes come open again. In the time after my wife, Kathy, died a little over 9 years ago, I was in the companionship of a wonderful therapist here in Nashville. And she gave me the space just to let me cry my eyes out. And that went on a whole lot longer than I thought it was going to go on, you know. I mean, I thought I'm a professional, you know, I know how to deal with this grief stuff. Oh, boy. And one of the things that she said to me really got my attention. She said, Gordon, you know, as sad as you are about this situation of losing your wife, she said, I think you're equally as mad. And boy, that really got my attention. And so one of my first teachers was Henry Nouwen. I went to my very first class in divinity school with Henry Nouwen. That was some good karma. That was good luck. And I remember some years after I had become an Episcopal priest and I had my first major depressive episode, Henry called me up out of the blue. And this was after he had had his own breakdown. And he told me about some so-called bioenergetic exercises that he had used that had helped him when talking wasn't really helping him. And so I used some of those exercises. I talk about those in my book, The Body Knows the Way. I want to read you a little piece from this book. It's about a particular icon, and I don't know if you can see this. It's kind of hard to really see this, but it's an icon of what's called in the Eastern Orthodox tradition, the harrowing of hell. So I want to read you a little bit about this icon. Here's an Eastern Orthodox icon that depicts the bringing together of the shattered parts into what Christians call the mystical body of Christ, one name for what I'm calling the body of belonging in this book. The icon represents the most important event in the Eastern Orthodox Church year, the resurrection. But this icon will look strange to most Americans or Western Europeans because the iconic form of the resurrection, originally preferred in Eastern Orthodoxy, was actually the event known in the West as, quote, the descent into hell, or more colorfully, the harrowing of hell. In this icon, the risen Christ has broken the gates of Hades and is reaching down to free, quote, the imprisoned spirits, represented by Adam and Eve. Christ grasps Adam and Eve by the back of the hand, a gesture that in the Roman world signified purchasing freedom for a slave. In the harrowing of hell, Christ brings deliverance to the captives, those held in bondage to sin and death. The icon shows Christ pulling Adam and Eve out of their tombs and into paradise. You do not have to believe there was an historical Adam and Eve in order to catch its mythic meaning. Allegorically read, there is a loving awareness that redeems all the broken, rejected, wounded, imprisoned parts of ourselves. This embodied presence, represented here by the risen Christ, not only allows but welcomes these exiled, broken parts of ourselves into heaven, which is not a place, but a state of consciousness, which is another way of saying that heaven and hell are very real, but perhaps not in the way conventional piety pictures them. I recall someone saying that he didn't know if there was a place called hell, but he sure knew what it was like to be in it. Abraham Lincoln, whose mother died when he was 9 years old, whose infant brother died, whose father was cold and violent, whose first love died of typhoid, who had 2 sons die in childhood, knew again and again what it was like to be shattered. Lincoln never denied his depressions. They were in full view of everyone. As a young man, he wanted to kill himself after his first love died, and his friends went on suicide watch to protect him. He lived with the enormity of the horrific casualties of the Civil War and gave his life to bring the shattered American nation back together. His Emancipation Proclamation redeemed the lives of 4 million enslaved persons. With his unmatched gift for naming the plain truth, Lincoln famously said of himself during his presidency, "If there's a worse place than hell, I'm in it." So I found myself thinking about people in Israel and people in Gaza, the victims and the victimizers and the rescuers. And if there's a worse place than hell, they're in it. There's a letter in mindfulness circles. It's a pretty famous letter, but it was written by the Western mindfulness teacher Ram Dass, who died last year, I think, maybe a couple of years, last year it was. And Ram Dass wrote one of the foundational Western texts of mindfulness. It's called Be Here Now. The rest of that quote is, "Be here now, be someplace else later. Is that so hard?" Yeah, actually it is. So this is a letter. It's called A Letter to Rachel. And Ram Dass wrote this to the parents of a little girl who had been murdered and sexually assaulted. So again, a worse place than hell. Dear Steve and Anita, Rachel finished her work on earth and left the stage in a manner that leaves those of us left behind with a cry of agony in our hearts. As the fragile thread of our faith is dealt with so violently. Is anyone strong enough to stay conscious through such a teaching as you are receiving? Probably very few. And even they would only have a whisper of equanimity and peace amidst the streaming, screaming trumpets of their rage, horror, grief, and desolation. I can't assuage your pain with any words, nor should I. For your pain is Rachel's legacy to you. Not that she or I would inflict such pain by choice, but there it is. And it must burn its purifying way to completion. For something in you dies when you bear the unbearable. And it is only in that dark night of the soul that you are prepared to see what God sees and to love as God loves. Now is the time to let your grief find expression. No false strength. Now is the time to sit quietly and speak to Rachel and thank her for being with you these few years and encourage her to go on with whatever her work is, knowing that you will grow in compassion and wisdom from the experience. In my heart, I know that you and she will meet again and again and recognize the many ways in which you have known each other. And when you meet, you will know in a flash what now is not given to you to know. Why this had to be the way it was. Our rational minds can never understand what has happened. But our hearts, if we can keep them open to God, will find their own intuitive way. Rachel came through you to do her work on earth, which includes her manner of death. Now her soul is free, and the love that you can share with her is invulnerable to the words of changing time, to the winds of changing time and space. In that deep love, include me. In love, Ram Dass. There is a phrase, you may have come across it. It's there in the psychological literature these days. It's called spiritual bypassing. In the theological world, it used to be called quietism. And what it gets at is the use of contemplative practices, meditation in particular, as a way to really kind of hold at bay the ouch of life. That's what spiritual bypassing is. This letter is the exact opposite of spiritual bypassing. It really is willing to go and stand right in the crucible with these parents. And I find it remarkable. Whenever children die, and especially when children die violently, I have memories of people that I've been with pastorally whose children have died. The baptism of a newborn child who died shortly thereafter. The funeral of a 3-year-old who died of leukemia in days when we didn't have some of the treatments that we now have for childhood leukemia. The death of a 13-year-old of brain cancer. In my younger days, I tried to make sense of all this suffering. I don't anymore. There's more space in me, and I credit the mindfulness practice, frankly. There's more space in me, less resistance, more love, less fear of these horrors. And there's a shift from me, offering something, thinking I've got something to offer, to say. It's more a feeling of something beyond me, offering what's coming through me. So I want to do a meditation with you today. It's called the Diamond Heart Meditation. It comes from Tibetan Buddhism. So I want you to imagine that you've got a diamond in your heart. It's about the size of a quarter. And this diamond is what the Tibetans, their word for it is bodhicitta. Bodhicitta. Bodhi is awake, and chitta is heart-mind. By the way, just parenthetically, if you ask little Christian children where God is, where's God? They'll point to the sky. If you ask Hindu children where God is, they'll point to the heart space. They point to the heart center. So this meditation goes to the heart center, and just imagine a diamond in your heart. Again, if you like, let your eyes gently close. They can be open if you like, whatever's comfortable for you. And just imagine this diamond of awakened heart mind, awakened vast, vast love is planted there in your heart. And we'll go back to rocking in the cradle of the breath. We'll just go back to breathing. You don't have to put your hands around your torso. Just let yourself breathe. And on the out breath, what we're doing is we're just breathing out the immensity of this love. This is the divine love. This is the divine presence. It's the presence of the risen Christ. It's the presence of the awakened Buddha. And we're breathing it out to any and all who are struggling. There may be a particular friend or family member, someone in your life to whom you want to send this love. But on the in-breath, what we do is we breathe in their suffering. We actually take it in. But when it comes to that diamond in the heart, it just goes zap. It just zaps it, because that love is so much stronger, and it overcomes even the immensity of this suffering. So we're just breathing in difficulty, pain, loss, grief, despair, horror, whatever it is. We're breathing that in. And then on the out breath, we're just breathing out the immensity of this compassion, the immensity of this love. This is the way I watch the news. I breathe in, earthquake news, massacre news. So much of the news is about pain and suffering, so much loss. But this is a way to convert watching the news into spiritual practice, and it's not the spiritual bypass. We're breathing in difficulty, what the Buddhists call dukkha, difficulty. And we're breathing out this tender and strong presence, a grace that is large enough to contain the terror of this mortal life. So we'll just do this in silence again for a minute. Breathing in the difficult and breathing out this great compassion. It's the compassion of the risen Christ who has the marks of the nails in his hands and feet. In fact, let Christ or let the Buddha or let a spiritual exemplar do the meditation for you. Trade bodies with them for a moment and let them do the meditation. Let them breathe in the suffering. It might be Mary or Tara. See who's real for you. Let him do the meditation. We're not just making something up here. We're actually connecting with this great cloud of witnesses that it always is holding us. They say, I've got you. I've got your back. I'm with you. Good. So when you're ready, just let your eyes come open. So what I want to do is open up the chat for you just to type in any experience, comment, anything you want to share for the larger group of us. While you're thinking of what you might want to put in the chat, I'll tell you a story from Rami's teacher, Rabbi Rami's teacher. His teacher was Reb Zalman Schachter Shalomi. Reb Zalman was a great friend of Thomas Keating. For those of you who come out of the centering prayer world, he and Thomas Keating were partners in crime. And Reb Zalman was one of the major voices in progressive Judaism in this country in the last century. And he said, you know, the obligating icon for our time is not the cross or the Star of David or the crescent moon. He's talking about the Abrahamic religions here. He said the obligating icon for our time is not any of these symbols. He said the obligating icon is that picture of Earthrise taken from the Apollo missions, where you see the Earth coming up behind the moon as blue-green ball in space. He said the obligating icon for our time is not about these national boundaries, these tribal boundaries. It's realizing, oh, listen, we are really all in this together. So how we make it from, these tribal expressions of violence to the interbeing, that's Thich Nhat Hanh's word, the intercommunion that we all share, that's a whole nother thing. So let's see what we've got in the chat. Kathy says, have had a pilgrimage to the Holy Land planned for December 1st. So your lesson today has been very powerful and needed. Oh, thank you, Kathy. I was really unprepared. I had not been to the Holy Land before. I was unprepared for how powerful I found it. Less so for me, the crowds of Jerusalem, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre was like, it was like a mosh pit. I mean, it was so crowded. But being in the Garden of Gethsemane and being by the Sea of Galilee really brought the presence of Jesus home to me. It was, for me, so wonderful to be there with my dear rabbi friend was especially strong. Susan says, thank you for this, Gordon. On Monday, I practiced Tonglen. That's this practice that we just did, this sending and taking called Tonglen. I practiced Tonglen for the captives, their loved ones, the captors, and those who ordered the captures and killing. Oh, wow. Way to go, Susan. Such angst, such anger, fear, revenge, and righteousness. I breathed out a lot of compassion, calm. fear, peace, grace, and love. Thank you, Susan. We're reading off the same page. Yeah. Here's Diane. She says, isn't all difficulty, all tribal issues due to original sin that causes us to be self-centered? We can never get beyond it. We can only strive to mitigate our actions, reactions, and work toward compassion and love. Worthy goals. Oh, hard to get there. Yeah. Diane, you may know this. In Buddhist practice, they don't have the language of original sin. They have the language of original goodness. And this bodhicitta, this diamond in the heart that with which we were practicing, is an outward and visible sign of this original goodness. Judeo-Christian language for this is language from Hebrew Bible, from the creation story, in which it said that humanity is made in the image and likeness of God, imago Dei in Latin. And again, in the Protestant world, especially the evangelical world, there's such a heavy emphasis on original sin. How these two dance together, original goodness and the sense that there's something really wrong, there's something really missing, something amiss. This is really the territory of our spiritual life, isn't it? Yeah. Diane says, I love the idea of original goodness. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, Mary Beth, I know we're kind of getting toward the end of time, and I know you have some things that you would like to say. I just want to give a little commercial for our retreat in December. I do this with my dear friends Ryan Black. And Ryan is just a masterful Tai Chi teacher, and he makes it so accessible, our Qigong practice for people. And then Kenneth Robinson is our Kirtan chant leader. And the three of us just have a lot of fun kind of doing our improvisational jazz with each other. So come and join us that first weekend in December if you're so minded. Yeah. Mary Beth, it's all yours.
Absolutely. That is exactly the invitation that I would extend. And also, if any of you would like to stay connected to St. Mary's and are not already, there are a couple ways that you can do that to stay informed. We have a daily quote and photograph called First Light. It is a photograph from our in-house photographer, Colleen McDonald, who's our director here. She does photographs of the campus that are absolutely gorgeous. Every photograph is a real picture of the beautiful things that are here on the campus here at St. Mary's Sewanee, with a one quote, a beautiful quote. It's a very simple, beautiful way to start the day if you're interested in signing up for that. Also, we do very light, mild emails just to help our supporters and those that are interested to stay connected with us. And what I mean by that is we don't flood your email box. If you would like to sign up for our emails, we'll do a newsletter. We do a fundraiser at the end of the year and during the spring, which we have few more emails during that time, but otherwise we just help you stay informed of what's going on. We do social media, Facebook and Instagram. We'd love for you to stay connected with us that way as well. So anyway, if you're interested in those things, you do have my email and you can just drop me a line and let me know and I'll get you signed up. Otherwise, thank you for being with us today. Thank you for being a part of this. Thank you, Gordon, for sharing with us. It was so moving and so relevant and helped all of us, I think, in such a special way. I hope you all take this with you and have a beautiful day. And Let me know if you have any questions as a follow-up. Just give me a call or email. Thank you, everyone. Love to all of you.